all of this work is part of a history in the struggle for justice in our country, whether for women's rights or immigrants' rights or equality in every respect, and certainly at the heart of it, our country's history of racial oppression and the vibrant movements for racial justice that have made this country more open, more equal than our founding and the era of Jim Crow and the period since. But the problems and the issues of racial inequality are deep, they're historical, they're persistent, and they will be matched by the persistence of the people in this room, by the power of the people in this room, by the power of the people in all of our communities. And that history has been matched by the power of a woman and a group of leaders who have absolutely transformed this conversation in our country. And it is my honor to introduce to you our keynote speaker, Patrisse Cullors. Patrisse is an organizer, an artist, a freedom fighter. She is the founder of the founder of Dignity and Power Now coalition in Los Angeles, which fights for the rights of people who are incarcerated. And she's also one of the founders of the Black Lives Matter movement and organized hundreds of people to go to Ferguson and continues to fight to end this racial injustice in our country that we're gonna make some serious progress on working together. So thank you so much, Patrisse, for joining us.
Hey everybody, it's good to see the team. I'm just trying to take it all in. So I have a few things to say today, and hopefully they're interesting to y'all. Some of it is my own story and how I come to this work. Some of it is to motivate folks to continue doing this work, because it can be exhausting for many of us who are directly impacted. The continuous imagery that we see of our people being killed and murdered by law enforcement can be demoralizing. But I think it's these moments, right, when we come together and gather around particular bills or a particular initiative that can really support our long-term motivation towards changing this country and thus changing the world. So my name is Patrisse Cullors. I am the founder and executive director of Dignity and Power Now, which is a Los Angeles-based organization fighting for the dignity and power of incarcerated people, their families, and communities. And I'm also one of the co-founders of Black Lives Matter. Oh, I'm gonna pause. So if you feel like you wanna hoop and holler during this situation, please do so. A quiet audience always makes me nervous. So, because we're here to make change, right? Like, we didn't wake up early in the morning or travel all the way down here to Sacramento to sit and just listen to me. We're here to actually make some substantive change in this state. So feel free to clap. And the impact of poverty and racism is both detrimental and unproductive. Don't we all agree that in order for democracy to work, we must have transparency and accountability? I know that I believed as a child growing up in this country that was necessary. Unfortunately, though, very early on in my life, I was shocked and disturbed by all the ways this country did not practice transparency and accountability. I grew up in Los Angeles. Thank you. All the love to all the other places in California, but I do love Los Angeles. In a small barrio called Van Nuys. There were so many special things about that neighborhood. Oh, we got some Van Nuys people in the house. Whether it was a Latino brother who sold películas on the corner, or the abuela selling her tamales as she walked up and down the street. But there was also another feature to my neighborhood that was not so pleasant. Lots of policing and patrolling, and consistently stopping and frisking my siblings and their friends. By the time I was 12 years of age, every young man in my neighborhood had been arrested by law enforcement. In fact, the police helicopter was so common, the chopper noise became a familiar sound for me and my community members. The good news is my story does not end or begin in Van Nuys, nor does it begin or end with the trauma that I witnessed at the hands of law enforcement. But rather, my story answers a larger question about what to do when an individual, a community, or a nation is in crisis. We, and yes, I mean we, as in every person in this room, is responsible for the crisis that this nation is currently in. Let me tell you the definition of crisis. Crisis. In a time of intense difficulty, trouble, or danger, a time when a difficult decision must be made. This country is in a crisis, and this current crisis has pushed so many of us out in the streets, protesting in the name of so many I can no longer keep up with the hashtags. This crisis has pushed us to redefine how we understand anti-Black racism. It's pushed us to listen to the cries from undocumented and unafraid movement. The crisis has made us fight the sterilization of women inside of California prisons. The crisis has reminded us how ever-present the school-to-prison pipeline is. This crisis has pushed us to act. This crisis has pushed us to act. Yeah. I am a firm believer in the power of the people. Right? Isn't that why we all showed up to ACLU Lobby Day? Yes. Because we know how much power exists in this room. Because we know the tactic of moving legislation is but one way to transform our society. Each of us is given an opportunity to show up and speak to our legislators and share why these bills matter to us. From SB 178, which will protect our electronic information, to AB 102, which will limit the current practice of schools offering classes without educational content, and would establish a statewide process for providing technical assistance and support to school districts that rely on institution-free classes. And lastly, AB 953 and AB 619. This bill revises the definition of racial profiling to clarify that it bars the use of race in any discretionary law enforcement interaction and requires law enforcement to collect and report uniform data regarding all uses of force. Each of these bills provide a mechanism of support that can produce change inside of the state of California, and I argue, changing the entire country. Each one of us play a pivotal role in either being a perpetrator of this country's crisis or supporting the healing that is so needed in this country. And honestly, this work boils down to the need for us as humans to have agency, and that opens up the space for our dignity. As a community organizer, I believe there is a campaign for everything. When something terrible happens in our community, we are often left demoralized. But we all come from such resourceful and resilient communities. We should remember it's always been a small group of people who sparked change and ignited movements. When I was 28 years old, I started Dignity and Power Now. That was only 3 years ago. I had two motivations: the ACLU's 86-page complaint against the Sheriff's Department, and two, my brother, who was 19 when he was brutally beaten by the Sheriff's Department, was relieved when he heard the sheriffs were being sued. He said, quote, "Finally, they will be held accountable for what they have done to so many people," end quote. Today, I can proudly say that DPN has won permanent civilian oversight over the Los Angeles Sheriff's Department. When I was 29, myself, Alicia Garza, and Opal Tometi co-founded the hashtag and the movement Black Lives Matter. This was an important intervention because 2013 was the year of the Zimmerman trial and the year in which Zimmerman was acquitted of Trayvon Martin's murder. Many of us took to social media to grieve the not guilty verdict. After witnessing so many acts of violence against the Black community, both in my childhood and as a young adult, I realized there had to be more that we could do to intervene in the national dialogue, as well as the practice around anti-Black racism. There was a sharp clarity: if we didn't do something different this time around, we would lose so many more lives in vain. Black Lives Matter is one example of an affirmation that soon evolved into a movement and has captured the global imagination to see what is possible. We must and we have to imagine a world that reimagines public safety. State violence isn't just about law enforcement using lethal force. State violence is much broader. It's not having access to healthy food, to proper education, to shelter, to a meaningful job. Our job as regular folk is to identify a problem and find the solution to that problem. We shouldn't wait on our local government to make change. We should demand the change. That is what's so powerful about this current moment. We have witnessed so many people stand up for what is important to them. The fight to be seen and for communities to be seen is more than a fight for visibility. It is a fight for our dignity. It is a fight for our power. Our dignity is critical, and when it is violated, it is not just felt individually, it is also felt collectively. This is our moment to utilize the legislative process, not just as a thing to do, not just as a thing we do to go vote, but as a thing we do to come together as a team to collectively create a world that is possible, that is healing, and that does not exist in crisis. This is our moment, and we have such an amazing opportunity in front of us. Utilize this process, go back home, and continue to fight the good fight. So I just want to close this off. If I can get everybody to stand, whoever is able to stand. I'm going to close off how I always close off every event, every meeting, every gathering. And you're just going to repeat after me. This is a quote from Assad Shakur. It is our duty to fight for freedom. It is our duty to fight for freedom. It is our duty to win. It is our duty to win. We must love and support one another. We must love and support one another. We have nothing to lose but our chains. We have nothing to lose but our chains. It is our duty to fight for our freedom. It is our duty to fight for our freedom. It is our duty to win. It is our